Okay, let's start. Selamat sejahtera, hello everyone. A warm welcome. Thank you for joining us for the second session of the SEACAR Report 2.0 webinar series, which also marks the launch of the SEACAR Report 2.0 that is titled Strengthening Southeast Asia Adaptation and Resilience Through Collaboration and Innovation. So this webinar is hosted by the Southeast Asia Climate Adaptation and Resilience Alliance, or as we like to call it, SEACAR, a collaboration between Boston Consulting Group, BCG, Think City, and WWF Malaysia. My name is Ain Zahra, and I'll be your MC this evening. Well, this is the second webinar in our current series. It actually marks the third and final installment in showcasing the chapters of our SEACAR Report 2.0. The first installment took place during the ASEAN People's Forum in May, followed by our second webinar in July. If you missed those, the recordings are available on WWF Malaysia's YouTube channel. Tonight, we continue the conversation by highlighting the power of nature, collaboration, and innovation in shaping a climate-resilient Southeast Asia. Here's a quick rundown of today's agenda. We'll start with an opening keynote, followed by presentations from our authors. Then we'll open the floor for a Q&A session, and we'll move into the long-awaited launch of the SEACAR Report 2.0. Throughout the session, feel free to drop your questions in the comments below. Kindly identify yourself and mention which speaker or topic your question is directed to. So thank you all for being here tonight, and let's get started. So now it's my honor to invite Dave Siva Prasad, Managing Director and partner of Boston Consulting Group BCG, to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you, Ain. Thank you and welcome everyone. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be able to launch this report together. And just as a bit of a recap, SEACAR was conceptualized and launched at COP28 with the focus of advancing adaptation in Southeast Asia, with nature and technology coming together as ways to advance the adaptation agenda in our region. And the goal was simple. It is to make adaptation resilience central to Southeast Asia's growth story. I mean, we are a region with 700 million people. We have huge natural assets, 4 of the world's biodiversity hotspots. Economically and socioeconomically, our region is poised for massive growth. That said, we are also a region that is heavily impacted by climate, with floods, heat, coastal risk that threatens livelihoods, economies, natural ecosystems in the region. So it is a major priority and an area that we collectively need to address. And that's where this report brings together showcases of action that's happening today, on collaborative action that brings together governments, corporates, NGOs, communities across different boundaries to implement adaptation action and build resilience in communities and economies. I mean, Southeast Asia is really at a crossroad. We are poised for growth. It is a region with huge promise. It is a very unique and diverse region, and the impacts of climate have the potential to really limit that progress and that promise of growth. And this report really is intended as a showcase, as a resource to highlight some real world examples. You hear some of them from the distinguished speakers shortly, but they highlight where action's really happening across communities and countries in Southeast Asia, and really that proof of local innovation in action. It showcases how nature, data, community leadership are driving change and driving change that has potential for scale. And some of the themes that you will hear are how local leadership matters, communities are agents of change, nature and technology working together to get the best of both and really get the 1 + 1 = 3, and that resilience adaptation and resilience is complex. We need to bring whole ecosystems together, connecting communities, economies, health, jobs, natural ecosystems to be able to achieve what needs to be achieved. And in that spirit, the power of partnership, that all of this is best advanced when you have many stakeholders within the ecosystem, from governments, corporates, NGOs, communities, working together, bringing science, policy, practice into action. And this is really the intent, is to contribute to this agenda as SEACAR. And finally, I'd like to just thank everyone for their incredible contributions to make this possible. Special call out, Ahila, Think City team, for your leadership in driving this, and the whole SEACAR Alliance, and all the teams and authors that have generously contributed their time and their investment to showcase these examples that can be an inspiration for much more in the region. So with that, thank you very much, and back to you, Ain.
Thank you, Dave, for that thoughtful introduction and for setting the tone for a meaningful webinar ahead. With that, let's begin our presentation session, where we'll hear directly from the voices behind the SEACAR Report 2.0. I'm pleased to hand things over to our moderator for this session, Lavanya Ramair. She's the Director of Policy and Climate Change from WWF-Malaysia.
Thank you so much, Ain, and thanks a lot, Dave, for the inspiring opening remarks. It's really a pleasure to be here, and again, thanks to everybody for making it today, especially our speakers who have made the time to present their excellent work. As I mentioned, this is the last of a series of events that we have been doing prior to the actual launch, which is also going to follow after this. And so it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today. We have actually 4 speakers of the 10 authors of this report today with us. And first, who we'll be hearing from is Mr. Aik Hoe Lim, who is the Director of the Trade and Environment Division at the World Trade Organization in Geneva. He has over 25 years of experience in trade policy, and he leads the WTO's work on sustainability, climate change, and trade. So without further ado, Ho, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lavanya. It's great to be with all of you. Thanks very much for the invitation to join this launch event. As Lavanya said, I work from the World Trade Organization, and although my contribution to the report is a personal one, often at the WTO, we don't talk much about cities. Yet cities are so critical to so much of trade, and I think vice versa as well. Cities today are really integrated into trade networks globally. So I thought this opportunity to reflect a little bit more on that relationship between trade, climate, city resilience, and more particularly climate adaptation was really very interesting. So for the 8 minutes or so that I have, let me share some slides which are more or less based upon the chapter contribution, although I've added a few more thoughts to it since then. So bear with me a bit while I go through this process of sharing slides. I think you should be seeing them now. So let me start with the basic premise of this chapter, which is to look at how international trade supports climate adaptation, and through there to look at the more specific intersection with cities and that relationship between trade and climate from an urban perspective. So what I'll try to cover, and very briefly and very quickly, is that trade and climate nexus. What does that actually mean? And why do we need to consider global policies such as trade policies? A little bit on climate change and its impacts on trade. And since cities are such a key hub, I would say, for trade, it's quite important to consider this. And maybe something a bit more positive, how do we think of trade and trade policy in particular as a climate adaptation strategy? And what can that mean concretely for cities? And here I'll try to look more specifically at a group of issues which I've broadly put under environmental goods and services. And then lastly, some reflections on there's today is almost unavoidable whenever you have a presentation to not say something about AI. So let me also talk a little bit about AI. Now, I think this is basically stating the obvious. Climate change is not just a phenomena from a sort of environmental nature perspective, but is also a major factor in economies because it disrupts production, disrupts supply chains, infrastructure, and unfortunately the impacts tend to be the strongest in developing nations. At the same time, we do have some positive things to say about how trade itself could be a part of a strategy, part of an adaptation strategy, particularly through diversifying sources and encouraging more trade, more investment, but the right type of trade and the right type of investment. And lastly, some reflections on AI more generally. So, as all of you know, in Southeast Asia, the bulk of Southeast Asian population lives in cities, and it will increasingly become so by 2050. Cities are also where we generate a lot of our economic wealth, our economic potential. Dave spoke a bit about the Southeast Asian potential. Already, cities globally generate some 80% of GDP, and I would suspect that figure is pretty close if you look at Southeast Asia as well. But at the same time, cities are, as well as all countries actually, not just cities of course, but given the heavy population concentration in cities, they are also very heavily affected by climatic disruptions. There have been many, so I'm not going to go through all of the different disruptions that we've had. And these disruptions have strong ripple effects, not just in the locality or in the country, but globally. For instance, a major disruption in Taiwan, having ripple effects through production of computer chips and so forth, becomes actually a trade impact more globally. So that's the context. And if we look more specifically into this context, we know that trade today is dependent upon global supply chains. It requires access to specialized materials, technologies, inputs. No country can actually be resilient by itself. I think that's just a truth, really. There are many different ways to think about resilience, and of course there has to be a balance between local production and global production. But the reality is that we are not going to be resilient by being totally being insulated from trade, so to speak. Why? Because there's a huge dependence on advanced materials, equipment, global supply chains, for instance, technology or technology transfer. We need to make adaptation solutions more affordable. Usually that's done through economies of scale, and therefore being connected to a global supply chain is a way to both disseminate solutions and make them more affordable. So in short, the proposition of the chapter is that without open and resilient trade flows, adaptation becomes costlier and actually, I would also argue, less equitable. Now, some of the things that we've observed a lot in trade and climate, often we think about impacts of trade on climate, and there are clearly impacts because trade is an economic activity. All economic activity will generate environmental impacts. But at the same time, another challenge that is becoming clearer and clearer is that climate change itself is impacting trade. And we already know that, with projections that a 1% temperature rise is estimated to result in further drops in export growth for developing countries. A lot of this is transmitted through impacts on infrastructure, such as ports, roads, railways, and so forth. And that particular point of infrastructure is important because for cities to be resilient, they also need to have their own resilient infrastructure. And again, we've got many examples where unfortunately that is always not possible or not present today. So how do we then turn things around? How do we think about trade as part of an adaptation strategy? For some countries, it's clearly already part of their strategy. For instance, for diversifying supply chains and enhancing food security. Take Singapore just as an example. It's heavily dependent on supply chains. It does require a lot of imported food, as well as other types of imports. And it is also itself going to be impacted, or already has been impacted, by climate change. And impacts of climate change on its own supply chains as well as global supply chains becomes a really important consideration of resilience for Singapore. And so that question, I think, of linking trade into climate and into city resilience, it is something that does require a little bit more reflection. We have some things going on at the international level. Here I mentioned one of the WTO initiatives, Trade and Environmental Sustainability Structured Discussions, promoting cooperation, capacity building, different types of trade policies on climate, hasn't yet really engaged on the question of urban resilience or cities. But I just put it out there as an example of the things that are going around more internationally. I could speak more, but I'm conscious of time, so I just want to shorten a bit and then focus on one particular area that could be very interesting for cities, which is environmental goods and services. This is a cluster, basically. It's a cluster of different goods that are needed for pollution control, cleaner technology, resource management, and so forth. All of these goods, I would argue, are needed by cities in order to be more resilient. And we do know that cities already adopt different types of partnerships on green buildings, water management, use of renewable energy, and so forth. So the question is, how do they better access these goods? And how do they get to these goods at a cheaper price? And here, it's not always cities, of course, because the ones who are really engaged at that level of trade policy are the governments, the national governments. But I still think it's an important discussion for cities to have with their own governments on the types of trade policies that would enhance their access to these types of goods. So for that purpose, I just have a few illustrative slides. This goes beyond what's in the book, actually. I'm not going to go into great depth, but here I try to think through different examples of goods and services and clustered them into waste management and reuse equipment, renewable and resilient energy systems, resilient construction materials, climate resilient cooling and ventilation systems, as perhaps the sort of things that cities require and probably will require more as we go forward. And sort of looked at them in terms of trade relevance, because some of it is very high. Not all of these goods are available to all countries equally. There's a need to engage in the global supply chain. And here becomes a trade question. Can cities access these goods easily or not? Or are they going to be very expensive? What are the possible bottlenecks? And how does one accelerate access to these goods? Again, a few other types of goods to illustrate, from climate monitoring and early warning systems, low emission mobility equipment, and emergency disaster response equipment, digital and trade infrastructure tools. So there are many different things. And I think this is an interesting maybe angle to look at this question. Look through the goods that you need, things that you need to bring into your resilience strategies, and then work through there to say, are our trade policies today actually helpful to cities to access these types of goods and services? And very lastly, we all have also been doing quite a lot of work at WTO lately on AI and trade. A lot of this is yet to be fully digested in terms of what it means for trade policy, but we also recognize that the AI presents both opportunities and challenges. Some of it might be in terms of its relationship to the environmental goods and services that I've already mentioned. Some of it might be more directly to the types of things that urban planners are already using for city and city resilience. If we think about it from a trade perspective, it will often be about, you know, what types of access do cities have to these types of services. Let me stop there and just give you a very quick run through of the types of things I was trying to sort of bring together, which is firstly that trade is very much central to climate adaptation. In fact, I think that's one of the key strategies. It can do so through providing better access to resilient technologies, helping with economic diversification, engaging on global cooperation platforms, and there are, of course, new dimensions when we think about AI as well. So let me stop there, Lavanya, and pass the floor back to you. It's been quite a rapid run through, but I hope it was reasonably coherent. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I mean, that was really tour de force, I think. You covered a vast topic there on the trade and climate interactions. And thanks for pointing out the many dimensions. And I think we really look forward to reading about it in greater depth in the report. Also, you know, always adaptation is thought of as a local issue and it's only, you know, a local concern. But I think through your sharing just now, you showed that it's actually whatever might happen at a remote part of the world has got global impact across through the trade channels. So thanks very much for that. Now, let me now invite our second speaker to present and allow me to introduce Mr. Shashank Mishra. Shashank is a developmental professional with over 15 years of experience in climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction. He has led major programs with UN Habitat Myanmar and is the founder of the Myanmar Climate Action Network. So now, over to you, Shashank.
Thank you, Lavanya. Can I share my screen? I think the current screen has to be stopped. Okay, now I can. I hope this is clear now. Okay. Thank you so much, Lavanya, Dev, and Think City team for inviting me for this particular webinar. And as one of the co-author of a particular chapter, bringing the experience from Myanmar, I would like to share some of the findings from a Myanmar Climate Change Alliance program, which we have been implementing for the last 5 years in Myanmar, and especially in a politically and operationally challenging environment, and how we have been scaling up the locally led adaptation in the context of Myanmar. Myanmar, as you are aware, in Southeast Asia, or not only in Southeast Asia, but also across the globe, it is one of the most climate change impacted country. It has been continuously reported in the top 3 countries impacted by the climate extreme events in the last 2 decades. However, Myanmar journey to build the climate resilience has been inspiring, even though multiple political challenges. In the first phase of the program, we have been able to provide the support to Myanmar in developing, in formulating the Myanmar climate change policy, strategy, and master plan, which has been formally adopted in 2019. And then we have started implementing from 2020 onwards another program to support Myanmar Climate Change Alliance to support implementation of the policy, but also we were looking how we can scale the locally led adaptation. we have been, it met very wrong time, I will say, as it was the beginning of the COVID and in 2020, and later new challenges emerged after the 2021 political crisis in Myanmar. But the program kept going, and the focus was on two particular areas: how we can scale up the locally led climate adaptation in the very complex environment in Myanmar, but also we were looking at when the priorities were shifting in Myanmar, there was much more focus on the humanitarian response rather than development programs, how we can still revitalize the whole climate sector dialogue, include, engaging the various stakeholders in Myanmar. I will try to cover this one in my next 9 minutes, I say. To promote the building the local level resilience and locally led climate adaptation in Myanmar, we have developed this framework, and we were trying to see how we can address the local, the climate change issues in the given context of, in the current context of Myanmar, where there's a lot of focus was on the humanitarian response, so that it doesn't look like a standalone approach, but how we can, bridge the gap between the humanitarian operations going on in Myanmar and, the Myanmar country facing the climate change related challenges. So we have our framework, which you can see. We have been focusing on how we can bring this, trying to address the problem of the water, energy, food nexus, which is also a lot of interdependencies. The country is facing a lot of energy security related challenges, the food security related challenges, and how the local adaptation actions can really try to address these problems for the affected communities. While the nature-based solutions, promoting the nature-based solutions, including, promoting the gender-responsive climate action, and even in the politically complex environment, how we can engage the business, private sector in addressing the climate-related concerns was one of the focus area for the program, even though it was quite challenging to encourage the private sector to work with us in the current operating context. So we have been working in the different, let's say, climatic zone in Myanmar, so that we wanted to try and test and scale up the methodology in the different part. We have worked in the dry zone areas, which is the drought prone area in Myanmar. Central Myanmar, we have worked in the delta area, which is the frequently, the cyclone hit areas in the delta area, and including the problem communities are facing with the saltwater intrusion. In the hilly areas, last year after the typhoon Yagi, the area has seen a widespread flood in the hilly areas. And we have also tried and tested our methodology approach in the urban informal settlement in the peri-urban Yangon, because there's a lot of population living in the informal settlement and deprived of the basic urban services. The approach which we have taken, that we wanted to see the communities are at the center of driving the climate action, not they are seen mere as beneficiaries. So it is important when we are talking to the community that we are not talking in terms of the climate jargons, but we are able to, sit with them, discuss on the daily life issues with them, the livelihood issues with them, the education, health related issues with them, and how do we relate that one with the climate change phenomena which is occurring. I think then the community is better able to understand and prioritize among the multiple other priorities which they are facing, from the security to the food security and the the other issues in the country. We have been engaging with the community to enhance their awareness on the climate change issues. In the simple terminology, we have derived the simplified methodology on the climate change vulnerability assessment and the local adaptation, local climate action planning, so that it can scale up without much international experts assistance. We have been bringing the local civil society organization, the community-based organization, the youth and gender representative in the community, who can also be the leader and support the community. It was important for us that we provide these capacity building, say, capsules, the awareness to the community even before starting the process of the participatory climate change vulnerability assessment, so that there can be more meaningful participation and there can be stronger voices in the community. Similarly, we have also worked with a lot of schools in Myanmar. We have, in the lack of the formal schooling system, which is broken currently, a lot of students which are not attending the schools because of the political situation in Myanmar. We have tried to work with the monastic schools, which are like the community-based, schools, and they are serving the needs of the most affected people in Myanmar, like the orphans, the migrated people from the different part coming to the urban localities. So we have worked with the schools to raise their awareness and how they can use school as a living lab, for the adaptation related action. Some of the examples, I will not go through all the climatic zone, but some of the example I would like to highlight. Like we have been working in the Delta region. We have worked with the communities in Piapo, and there is the Bogale, 2 different townships which are on the coastal area. They have been frequently impacted by the cyclone in the last 20 years. But the primary reason, when we sit with the communities, we have also identified that the lot of mangroves has been cut down over the years, and it's not because they have the lack of choices. They rely a lot more on the mangroves for the energy, for the housing as a material. So they, in the lack of any alternate means, they have been cutting down the mangroves, and they are impacting their life. Their lives have been impacted by the frequent cyclone. We have worked around the mangrove restoration because it was not going to protect them from the cyclone in the future, but we were also trying to solve the livelihood related issues, how they can, improve the fisheries, the crab, production in the coastal communities. We have worked with the communities in the mangrove plantation, not only bringing the communities at the forefront on driving this solution, but also linking the local forestry group, the forest department, and also the local scientific organization in identification of the site where the survival rate can be higher for the mangrove, and doing the GPS related GPS monitoring for the mangrove plantation, so that in the next season for the lost mangrove plants, again the replantation can be done, and it can have a higher rate rather than because most of the mangrove plantation, more than 50% or less than 50% survive. So there was a continuous community led and the technology oriented the tracking of the mangrove areas, which has solved the coastal resilience, local communities, livelihood-related issues. We have tried some carbon credit-related schemes, how they can sell the carbon credit, and also the potential for the ecotourism in the area. Similarly, in the dry zone, we have been working with the communities to promote the climate-smart agriculture practices, efficient irrigation related practices to train them, and because that is a heavily drought prone area, the temperature also goes up to 48-50 degree in the summer, 45 to 50 degree in some places. And we have been seeking because in the last 2-3 years there has been a lot of migration of the male population to the urban areas. So we have been also looking how we can provide the leadership role to the women in driving these climate adaptation solutions. So bringing women into the decision-making systems, building their capacity and engaging them on the adaptation action. Similarly, in the rather than going all the areas, another area is like in the peri-urban Yangon, where a lot of population living in the informal settlement is deprived of the local urban basic urban services, especially the water security issues. We have been trying to address the problem for that. But we were also trying to see how we can develop these solutions, which which are climate smart and they are addressing the current needs. So we have developed a water treatment plant, there, but the other challenges were that there was not enough electricity in the township. The township was only getting few hours, sometimes 4 to 6 hours of electricity only. So even though there is a plant, the plant cannot run on the electricity supply. So when we developed this water system plant, we made sure that we are not only extracting the water from the ground, but we are also putting the groundwater recharge system through the rainwater harvesting in the same area. So that we are, we are not only extracting the natural resources, but we are making a climate smart move. We have also installed the solar supply to run the plant at least 8 to 10 hours. so that it can, run to its full capacity, even in the lack of the formal electricity, grid electricity supply from the authorities. Which has helped definitely to connect, to provide these two stations to 18,000 plus beneficiaries, the water security, improve their quality of life. And also we made sure that it is taking into account the women security issues at these path, the community to these plant related, this road network was well lit with the solar, so that women feel safe in the late evening, if they need to move and collect the water from those plants. Apart from that one, we have been putting a lot of effort to revitalize the whole climate sector dialogue, because the whole focus has shifted in the country only on the humanitarian response, and we wanted to find the space. There was a lack of engagement with the authorities because of the political situation, but we wanted to make sure that all the non-climate actors are working together to address the climate-related issues. And for that one, we have developed the online repository of, the website Myanmar Climate Action Network. So that was the digital data portal to share the climate-related stories, the climate projections, the events, so that there is a virtual space for the actors to participate. We have been leading and providing support, to make sure that the voices are there and voices are heard by the donor communities. We have been, we have been organizing World Environment Day, the different international day focusing on the climate change, Cities Day, World Cities Day, etc. We are also trying to see how the private sector can be engaged in this crucial time. It is although difficult because of the regulatory environment and all, but we are promoting, the sustainable business practices, how can change the business for themselves, how these practices can safeguard their own business, but also can contribute better to the affected community. So we have worked with the private sectors, to scale up those solutions, developing the business continuity plan for them, developing a private sector engagement strategy for Myanmar. We have worked with the journalists because they have the power to multiply, the voices on a very large level. So we have worked with the journalists to raise awareness on the climate change and the climate change reporting, and they have been 54 different communication material published by the journalists, which were read by millions of people in thousands and almost 1 million people in Myanmar. We have started the dialogue regularly on the climate. So we have organized Myanmar Climate Action Week, first time in 2023, and then 2024, 2025, bringing all the climate actors together and making sure that the climate change-related concerns are not forgotten in a conflict-affected country, as there was no formal representation of Myanmar in the international forum, regional forum, because of the no acknowledgement of the current authorities in the global arena. We have established Myanmar Climate Action Network, and it is a network of now more than 100 plus organizations. It was led by UN Habitat and WWF for the 2 consecutive years. It includes UN, INGOs, CSOs, private sector, including some of the embassies, and it has definitely created a buzz that as UN Habitat was taking the lead and I was representing, we made sure that climate change remain a key agenda in the UN strategic framework in the country and the INGOs framework in the country. And we made sure that, the donor have a continued interest. And we have seen over the year that more donor communities in Myanmar, they had continued interest to highlight the climate agenda and to fund the climate related project in Myanmar. Dissemination, in the interest of time, I would like to wrap up, and we have made sure that we are able to develop the communication material and disseminate among the wide set of actors so that there is a replication from the best practices. The program was very much challenging, but at the same time, a lot of learning how to promote the locally led adaptation in the conflict related country in Myanmar, and there are similar countries like Afghanistan and all, and other countries probably can take the lessons. And it was important that we need to make sure that we are talking in the same language, how the people are impacted by the humanitarian, the humanitarian organization. We are trying to address the issues, not putting the climate adaptation as a standalone issue, but how it is deep rooted with the multiple other issues which the country is trying to address. Climate adaptation definitely require a long-term engagement. It was visible, and I think we have been able to, raise the awareness on that one. The Climate Action Network is still exists, and it is, engaging with the different development partners and the donor communities to ensure that climate change agenda is not going to die. And the last thing, probably, Myanmar example, made us learn that true resilience really begins when the knowledge meets the empathy, when we are able to sit down with the communities, when we are trying to address their problem, then only we can succeed, because the communities are the architect of their own future. We cannot just preach. We need to listen. We need to understand their daily challenges. And then we need to find our space that how we are talking or relating the climate change related issues with their daily lives. And then only they will be able to take the action. Otherwise, the people are having the multiple other priorities in their life, and it may be very hard to push the climate agenda in the current situation in Myanmar. Thank you, and I will be happy to reflect back later.
Thank you so much, Shashank, for your fabulous sharing, touching on really the lived realities of communities at the forefront of these climate impacts, and particularly, the challenging situations that are found in, certain countries, navigating through those political challenges, and also that very important message that you left, the importance of the art of listening. So thanks a lot again for your excellent sharing. And now it gives me great pleasure to invite our third speaker, Professor Alex Lechner, a landscape ecologist with over a decade of experience in urban sustainability and environmental science. He currently teaches in the Master of Urban Design program at Monash University, Indonesia. Professor Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lavanya. So I'm presenting today on a range, hold on a sec, on the application of GIS tools for supporting spatial planning of urban nature-based solutions. So what I'm hoping to show in the next 10 minutes, a range of leading practice or best practice approaches to mapping a range of different ways in which we value nature-based solutions. And their primary focus on 3 case studies in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So firstly, nature-based solutions, you've heard about them, but more formally, they're described by the IUCN as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, simultaneously providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. And in the context of urban systems, they can range from, the very small, such as insect hotels, to the more grey-green hybrid infrastructure, such as green roofs or green walls, and all the way to existing ecosystems where we hope to promote better use of existing natural ecosystems, such as our large rivers and riparian areas, our urban forests, and our wetlands. So when we're managing for nature-based solutions, we're looking to identify areas to prioritize for protection, areas to restore, and we're looking at what type of values can we manage these nature ecosystems in order to prioritize nature-based solutions. So we're looking to be able to promote biodiversity conservation in the urban context, as well as a range of ecosystem services. So the benefits provided by nature to humans. And in the urban context, of course, those are things such as urban heat mitigation, their flood mitigation, and there's a range of what we call cultural ecosystem services, the value of walking in nature in terms of the health and well-being values. So within this context, within the urban context, we need tools So planners and developers and urban designers need tools to understand the spatial distribution of those values. You know, where are the priorities? What are the potential locations where different kinds of nature-based solutions, such as these green walls and roofs, to larger nature-based solutions can be developed and supported. And that's what I'm providing, what I provided in the chapter. And of course, there's not that much time to talk about all the 3 different case studies, but I'm going to quickly go through them now in this presentation. So they range from examples of where we're applying ecological connectivity modeling, where we identify biodiversity values, and to the other end of the spectrum, where we're considering human values for nature using participatory GIS approaches, and of course the combination of both, which are the ecosystem services, the benefits from nature. So I will provide a quick overview of these 3 different tool sets, and they're based on existing published studies that you can check out. So the first example, potential in terms of GIS approaches that we can apply, is that of wildlife connectivity modeling. And this image here you can see is from Greater KL, and it describes how we can use GIS analysis with remote sensing data to characterize habitat, ecological data to describe how species utilize habitat and utilize the urban matrix. And then we can use least cost path connectivity metrics to then characterize where are the important green spaces in our urban areas. And the idea being that we prefer, or we would want to have, a connected network of high quality habitat, connected habitat, in order to preserve urban biodiversity. And so this is just an example of some of the outputs that we generated using this connectivity analysis. And what you can see here are a range of maps for different kinds of ecological groups, from small arboreal, small terrestrial, medium arboreal, and medium terrestrial. And all the red lines here indicate the best pathways between patches in the landscape, so habitat patches, and the blue line indicates where the landscape is fragmented, where connectivity doesn't occur. And what these maps can tell planners, first of all, is that, for example, for small arboreal mammals, where there's lots of small patches and many linkages, but a lot of disconnects because of indicated by these blue component boundaries, what that tells our planners is that the landscape is essentially very disconnected and fragmented for these species. On the other hand, for medium terrestrial species, what we can see here is there's only a few larger patches, because medium terrestrial mammals require much larger patches, but also can move further distances. So from the perspective of medium terrestrial mammals, they can move across the whole landscape. So these kinds of analyses can tell us where are the priority patches, the patches that need to be saved, where are the priority linkages, the linkages between patches, the ones where we should create biodiversity-friendly urban areas. And we can also look at which species are perhaps unlikely to be able to be protected or will be super challenging. So the next example is of urban ecosystem services modeling. So this is where we're modeling the benefits from nature. And in this case, we were modeling using what's called process-based modeling, a range of ecosystem services, which include heat mitigation, runoff retention, sediment retention, scenic quality, recreation, and agricultural production. So with this process-based modeling, we use physics-based models using inputs such as topographic inputs, population density, land cover, the soil characteristics, and so on. And we can characterize a range of these really critical ecosystem services in the landscape. And with this mapping, we can first identify where are the areas, for example, that are really critical to protect because they support a reduction in flooding, for example. Where are the areas to protect because they provide excellent parks to support well-being? So we can first initially map these separate ecosystem services. We can overlay them all, and we can identify where are the hotspots of those multiple ecosystem services. And then finally, we can look at different kinds of strategies, one of protection, where we're trying to conserve existing hotspots, and one of where we're doing restoration. Where are the best locations in order to restore these ecosystem services that provide multiple benefits for the community? So this is a zoomed in example of a range of the outputs from that ecosystem service modeling. So my final example is mapping social values for ecosystem services and development preferences using public participatory GIS. So this is a method where we do spatially explicit mapping of social values. So where we're conducting a social survey, in this case, we surveyed around 400 people, and for each of those people, we asked them to identify locations on the map that represent 10 social values, such as aesthetic value, existence value, recreational value, and a range of development preferences. For example, areas where they think development should occur or areas where development shouldn't occur. So with this kind of mapping, we can start to understand, where do the people identify the critical important areas in terms of the nature-based values. So you can imagine bringing in the modeling of wildlife. We can understand where are the areas important for biodiversity, the ecosystem services. We can understand through a process-based model where are the critical areas where ecosystem services are provided. And then finally, we can ask the people to say, where are the areas which you think are important for biodiversity, for the provision of ecosystem services. So using a range of spatially explicit models, we can get a real full picture of the range of values in our landscape. And of course, we can then start applying the appropriate management processes and prioritize these areas based on a strong evidence base coming from both the data, but also from people. So to conclude, while these maps that I showed represent latest practice, there still aren't many examples across Southeast Asia. You can see this map on the right. What you can see is there's a huge concentration in places like Singapore, in Malaysia, and Thailand, in more of the high-income countries, and other parts of Southeast Asia are lacking examples of such applications. But still, these approaches are in their infancy in Southeast Asia, especially compared to the global north. There's a range of reasons, that financial limitations, the incentives for developers, for city planners, for example, to undertake this modeling. There are technical barriers. A lot of the parameterization, the data are unavailable. And of course, there's a lack of and limited human resources. There's a limited number of people who have the skills to undertake these models. But the key thing is, these models provide the really critical information that allows us to undertake evidence-based best practice decision making. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to thank especially Dr. Karen Lords who did a lot of the work presented here in her PhD. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that really comprehensive presentation. You packed in a lot in such a short time.
Yes.
Fascinating to hear about the focus on Kuala Lumpur, since some of us here are sitting in Kuala Lumpur, and glad to see that that's one of the featured areas. And really nice to see that interface between nature, AI technology, and the city all coming together so nicely. And I do recall something that the parks director in Singapore said when they, converted, there was a big monsoon drain or something, Bishan, that they converted back into a river. And her message was, when you support biodiversity, you will always have climate benefits. But sometimes it doesn't work the other way around. If you're only focused on climate, you may not necessarily generate biodiversity benefits as well. But thank you so much. I mean, I hope there's more of this kind of work that's carried out across this region, which I think would benefit it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Lavanya.
And now we will move on to our final speaker, Associate Professor Jason Lee Kai Wei, who is the director of the Heat Resilience and Performance Center at the Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, National University of Singapore. Unfortunately, Professor Jason can't join us live tonight, but he has kindly prepared a recorded presentation. So if you have any questions for him, please do go ahead and share them in the chat, and we will make sure that they are forwarded on to him. Thank you. So the team, if you could please play Professor's video.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to share about Project Heat Safe. Very briefly, Project Heat Safe is more than a research project. It is a capability we sought to establish to safeguard our exertional workers who continue to work hard and toil in our warming world. Heat Safe was funded by the National Research Foundation at the Prime Minister's Office, Singapore, under this Campus for Research Excellence and Technological Enterprise, CREATE in short. Our lead institution our co-lead institution is the Singapore ETH Center, and we work closely with the Ministry of Manpower and Workplace Safety and Health Institute together with a list of academic collaborators, as you can see at the bottom of this slide. No need to imagine any further. It has arrived. Heat is a silent killer. We can forget about it easily because it usually hurts humans more than the infrastructure. So UN SETGEN a couple of years back reminded us that we have entered into the brand new phase. It's no longer global warming, but boiling at this stage. And last year, UN SETGEN called for an urgent action on extreme heat, very specifically on critical areas such as caring for the vulnerable, protecting workers, boosting resilience of economies and societies using data and science, and to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius by phasing out fossil fuels and scaling out investment in renewable energy. And the same week, ILO also released a new report on global impacts on heat stress on workers. A couple of months back, WHO and WMO also issued another report on climate change and workplace heat stress. I ask that for those who are keen to find out more information, materials relevant to how a warming world can affect workers, these are a good start state. Here in Southeast Asia, especially, we have what I call the triple whammy: high heat, high humidity, and all year round. More warmer days and nights coming our way based on the latest projections. For those of us who can avoid the heat's behaviors, can be shaped. Lack of commute by walking, cycling, running to work. We hardly have any incidental physical activity count, which means when you exercise, it's almost always intentional. For those who cannot avoid the heat, risk of thermal discomfort is almost perpetual, hence work productivity losses, cognitive performance degradations, leading to poor decision making, or can be compromised. This is not good. So very briefly, Project Heat Safe sought to map the complex threat of heat exposure in relation to not just health, but productivity in workers. And of course, we wanted to, and I think we have identified preventive policy and actions that are scalable. So in short, the solutions are there, whether we have the gumptions to implement it at scale, something we hope more governments will come on board. So in this short presentation, we do not have time to go through all the results from our study, but I wish to highlight just one profiling study we did. So in here, we conducted physiological and ethnographic field-based case studies where we profile construction workers in Singapore working at both outdoor housing construction and indoor underground and tunnel construction sites. We monitor their physiology over a work shift and also conducted interviews with them to understand their individual experiences working in Singapore's heat. Here we share findings from the indoor construction sites and median values in black and shaded gray areas representing minimum and maximum values. In general, we found that the majority of workers were working within safe physiological thresholds, which is defined as 38.5 degrees Celsius body core temperature. Physiological strains index, in this case, the adaptive version range between 3 and 4. This is a good thing. It shows that the workers in Singapore are working within safe thermal limits in general and know how to pace themselves in response to high temperature. Well, you can take it, this is probably the best case scenario with research findings. As always, this selection bias. We anticipated most would be okay based on existing data. Our findings sort of echo that. We hence sought to identify and focus on the outliers, the few workers who experience high heat strain when working in the heat. This is especially significant and important as one heat injury case and one death is always one too many. So combined with ethnographic interviews, we were able to paint a story of this outdoor construction worker who was number one fasting during Ramadan. For whatever reason, did not want to break fast by drinking water, even though he felt thirsty, very religious, I presume, and was self-aware that he was being negatively affected by the heat. He was able to self-pace by resting in the shade whenever he needed to, which is actually a good, positive self-regulation intervention that allowed him to lower his physiological strain. So here, his peak core temperature rose as high as 38.6. Our Singapore Ministry of Manpower colleagues, I think, did an excellent job in proactively pushing out new measures following the findings of this project, and again, revised them last year. The enhanced heat measures to reduce heat stress for outdoor workers was formulated in consultation with the Ministry of Health Heat Expert Panel. A lot of recommendations proposed by this panel were in line with the findings we obtained from Project Heat Safe. So here's a brief summary of the enhanced measures rolled out by the Ministry of Manpower for outdoor workers. In view of time, I will just highlight a few. A rest duration based on WBGT levels under shades. More specific in our hydration guidelines, a good balance to avoid not just excessive dehydration, but the tendency to overhydrate, which can be equally bad. And more importantly, we impose on-site or in-situ climatic loggers for projects that's above 5 million. So this is a good summary of the enhanced measures we push out following Project Heat Safe. And then finally, I just want to end my short presentation by informing all that is the platform regionally that we can continue to do more of such work. As mentioned, good heat health advisory needs to be contextualized. There is no one size that fits all. So here you see the Global Heat Health Information Network, Southeast Asia Hub, by the region, made for the region. So this regional hub also focuses on workers' heat, as you can see, the heat at work bubble, amongst other focal areas that we are embarking on urban heat and traditional and cultural practices of heat. Here you see our specific goals and focus areas. So for more information on the hub, I ask that you scan the QR codes. I would like to end this presentation by playing a short video to depict the purpose and the goals of the hub, so that for those who are keen can get in touch with us as we continue to work together collectively in this region to ensure workers' health, productivity, and safety are maintained in spite of our warming world.
In a world gripped by rising temperatures, we in Southeast Asia stand at the front line of this global crisis. We are experiencing more intense, more frequent, and more severe heat events, creating unprecedented conditions that are threatening our health, our lives, and our livelihoods. We have always lived with the heat and humidity, so it's easy to think we're used to it. But as the heat intensifies, we must ask, are we truly prepared for what lies ahead? Our countries, provinces, and homes are feeling the strain of increasing oppressive heat, with schools closing, work disrupted, and heat-related illnesses on the rise. The toll of chronic heat stress is also impacting our health, productivity, and mental well-being. The region's rapid urbanization and aging populations, plus socio-economic disparities, further amplify the impacts, making this issue impossible to ignore. The time to act is now. This urgency has led to the creation of the Global Heat Health Information Network Southeast Asia Hub, a regional initiative of the global network which is spearheaded by the WHO-WMO Joint Office for Climate and Health. Anchored at the Heat Resilience and Performance Center at the National University of Singapore's Aik Hoe Lim School of Medicine, the hub will be central to the region's transformative action. Our mission: to foster collaboration, accelerate knowledge sharing, and catalyze evidence-based policy and action. By focusing on regional specific challenges and priorities to safeguard human health and well-being, we strive to prepare communities, protect populations, and empower individuals to thrive in a Southeast Asian climate.
Together as a region, this is our opportunity to build stronger, heat-resilient communities. For today, for tomorrow, and for future generations, let us commit to face these challenges head-on and build a heat-resilient Southeast Asia that can thrive in face of this warming world.
Together, let's rise above the heat.
พวกเรามาสู้กับความร้อนไปด้วย
Mari bertahan melawan haba. Cùng hợp thức phòng chống sốc nhiệt.
Daignatin ang init.
Bersama kita atasi rasa panas.
យើងរួមគ្នាយកឈ្នះបរិយាកាសក្នុងការខ្លាំង
Bersama เอาชนะอากาศร้อนอ้าวที่ท้าทาย
Okay, I apologize. The video is a little bit was a bit laggy, but I hope you get the gist of it. So with that, thank you for your time. Do scan the QR code to access HeatSafe website, where you can find more information about this project. Sorry I cannot be there, but do leave me with your questions and we will respond accordingly. So with that, thank you.
Indeed, that was such a fascinating presentation as well, touching on an issue that we often maybe not think about. Well, definitely here in Malaysia, most of the time we think about climate impacts in the context of floods. So this issue of heat, which might be more of a slow onset thing, which might creep up on us, is really something very timely and great that so much work is going on in Singapore on this with the hub base there. So now we have completed the presentations, not just of our 4 authors, but in fact, marking the end of the presentations of all the authors, in fact, of the 10 authors of this fascinating report. And we have a little bit of time for question and answers. So let me just see whether there are questions here from the audience. Okay. There is a question for Shashank. Shashank, how can traditional knowledge and local practices help communities across Myanmar's diverse regions adapt better to climate change?
Thanks, Lavinia. And it was inspiring to listen all other speakers on the various climate adaptation practices in Southeast Asia. Responding to your question on the role of the traditional knowledge and the local practices, I think in the context of Myanmar, and especially when we talk about the locally led adaptation, I think respecting the role of the traditional knowledge and the local practices becomes very important, because it's the local communities who are facing the real burden of the climate change. And it is important to have their say, to have their voices in this, driving these climate actions. We have worked with the indigenous communities in Myanmar, in the different part of the country. And I think, they know, I mean, as I said earlier, the local communities know better, how the climate change is impacting. They know even, the traditional solutions. We need to respect that one, they know how to deal with that one. I think what they need is, they need more tools, training, the capacity building support, networking, through the other, to get the support, lobbying with other actors, and also the finances in certain, most of the cases that, the finances has to be mobilized to support on that one. For example, when we were doing the climate, the mangrove restoration in the Delta area, it's the local community rather than we. I mean, it's the local community which know better what are the particular species as per the salinity of the water in the coastal area that can survive. What are the local sites where they have seen a better survival rate over the year. So I think, it is good to listen them, to learn their knowledge, and then bring the scientific information, bring the climate projections, because that's something where they are lacking. They don't know how the climate is going to change in the coming years. Because when we talk about the climate adaptation, or the climate resilience, we are not talking only to take into account the past, but also looking for the future, building the resilience for the future, not only helping them to address the current challenges, but how they are going to cope with the climate change projections in the country. Similarly, the examples we have seen, like when we work in the hilly area, and the communities has been long practicing this, the farming, the shifting farming, providing enough time, for the soil to, be fertile, so they know which are the crop, which they have been, but somehow they are not able to understand how this is related to the current, the climate change impacted. They have doing long term, they have been practicing long in the last few decades, those practices, but how in the current environment it is impacting their practices and what they can do better. I think that is something, they are lacking. So when we sit down, when we talk to the communities, they're about the local indigenous practices. I think they have a lot of knowledge. They know what they have been doing in the past. And even, sometimes, I mean, most of the time when you engage, the women, they provide you much better solutions, because they have been, in a lot of houses, especially in the context of Myanmar, there are many female-headed household we have seen, especially after the conflict, when there is a lot of, the migration, from the rural areas, people running in for the security purpose, for the food security, the education and all in the urban areas. So it's the female-headed household, which have played a long, sometime I would say, unrecognized, non-paid role, but they have been the backbone of the community, and there is a lot of potential to scale up with the capacity building, the resources, and and the networking with the like-minded actors in the community.
Thanks, Shashank. Thanks for giving us that insight. Ho, given the dependence of, well, cities in building resilience and trade, and also the dependence of trade itself on climate resilience through the supply chain. Are the players in the trade field understanding or getting more involved in ensuring that that supply chain remains resilient by investing into it for adaptation measures? Are you seeing that kind of trend happening? Are people waking up to the fact that we are in a very interconnected world, like you pointed out in your slide? Or are there still challenges in that understanding? And if so, what do you think needs to be done to overcome that?
Yeah, thanks, Lavanya. I think it's a mixed picture, would be the answer to what you said. I think you do see some good prospects with trade policies orienting itself more towards climate solutions or climate challenges. We see that through our environmental database in terms of measures that governments have taken that have a trade-related component notified to the WTO. This tends to be in terms of better technical regulations, better standards that relate to particular products, but also in terms of areas where they have been investing into. But I think we don't have systematic information, but from what I gather from the literature is that a lot more attention to mitigation than necessarily to adaptation. Mitigation, of course, is very key, and no one argues against that. But at the same time, we do know that there's not that much investment into adaptation, much more on mitigation. That's come through from the United Nations Trade Development Organization, which has an annual report on World Investment Report, and their figures, consistently show that the amount of investment into adaptation is very low, much more for mitigation. And so the question is often, why is that? And here I think we need to pose the question a bit to the private sector. I mean, from what I've heard from the private sector is that they often find it hard to make either a viable business case for adaptation, or they see it as something that is very infrastructure related and therefore something for the public sector to deal with. So I don't know, it's somewhere within there. Then for the trade perspective, the challenging thing for trade officials, I would say, or ministries of trade, is that it's not very clear to them what types of goods and services are we thinking about when we say adaptation, because it seems very wide, because in essence, if you think about it, it's very different from renewable energy generation. You've got a very specific set of goods in this case, or possibly services related to those goods. When we say adaptation, it could be from better roads, better rail transport, higher standards. It could be cooling systems, water management. So it's all of economy, all of society. So I think that lack of understanding what are they trying to do, what types of policies they should be trying to be addressing is probably a big challenge. And then on the more positive, I think there are ways to address that. I mean, every country has NDCs, as you know, nationally determined contributions. They also have national adaptation plans. That's one instrument to try to bring the different policy dimensions together, to try to understand what can they do to drive better adaptation, for instance. So if a country has a national adaptation strategy, and that adaptation strategy breaks down to the need to do some of the things that the speakers have already spoken about, they can then ask economic questions. Are they well positioned to address these strategies? And then they can add to the economic questions a particular trade lens, a particular trade and investment lens, to say, are their trade and investment policies coherent, for instance, to what they're trying to achieve in their NAPs? So I think these are probably practical ways to think through the challenge, to be quite concrete on what strategy, therefore what instrument, and therefore what range of policies are required. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ho. Thank you very much. I think it was quite encouraging last week here in KL. The Securities Commission actually organized a conference on climate adaptation and resilience, bringing together a lot of private sector players as well for their better understanding. So I think the movement is there, but I mean, what you shared with us really gives us better insights as to the pain points that also need to be touched on. Now, Alex, I've got a question for you from the group, from the forum, from the listeners as well. The person would like to ask, what does hotspot mean in the context of the spatial planning map?
Thank you for the question, and thanks a lot for the question from the audience. Yeah, so I guess hotspot is a very loaded term. So of course, people are probably thinking hotspot in terms of urban heat being a problem. So in the world of GIS, hotspot means areas of high value, or an area where we have multiple ecosystem services found in a specific location. So an example of a hotspot might be, there might be a green park which is in the headwaters of a catchment. So that green park may be identified as a hotspot or a priority area because that park may be near housing areas. It provides lots of recreational ecosystem services. Also, the fact that it's in this urban area, it may also provide heat mitigation, because we know when we have a lot of greenery versus impervious surfaces like concrete, where there's lots of greenery, that reduces the urban microclimate, urban heat. That the hotspot might include, that area might also be critical for flood prevention, because that area in the headwaters, of course, slows down the movement of water into the urban area. So it has, so of course it provides this flood mitigation ecosystem service. So a hotspot might be an area where we have a single ecosystem service that's provided, which is super critical, or it might be an area where we see multiple ecosystem services occurring together. And then once we have these hotspots or priority areas, these are the locations which we hope that planners will endeavour to conserve, to protect from development, to manage responsibly in terms of managing for biodiversity and so forth. And just finally to say, one of the principles of nature-based solutions is that of looking out for co-benefits. So maybe we're looking for climate mitigation in terms of the vegetation absorbing CO2, but we're also looking for climate change adaptation in terms of reducing urban heat island, but also we're looking for co-benefits, things like the recreational value of those areas, the ability to mitigate flood, maybe there are non-timber forest products and so forth. So that's what we're thinking about when we're looking through the nature-based solution lens, locations which provide multiple ecosystem services, multiple benefits. And if we compare that to grey infrastructure, when we look at, There's lots of grey infrastructure in our urban areas where we're, for example, our stormwater drainage system, which is made up of concrete channels and channelized rivers. They only provide one service, that is flood mitigation. But what urban ecosystem services do, what nature-based solutions do, they provide multiple services to people beyond that single service. So that's why we imagine that the application of nature-based solutions is a much better alternative in terms of the multiple co-benefits that we get from restoring and protecting nature in urban areas. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. And really, I think the whole reason we set up the three organizations, BCG, Think City, and WWF, we set up SEACAR Alliance was for this very purpose, to bring together a community, to share together. And I think, today's webinar really proves the power of that. So thank you so much to all of you for all your wonderful sharing. I'd also like to thank all the authors, the 10 authors who had contributed to the preparation of the report that we are about to launch. You see them all on the screen right now. Some of them might be listening in as well to today's webinar. So a huge thank you to each and every one of you for your invaluable contribution, for bearing with us, throughout the whole process of preparation, and for also so kindly sharing again all your wonderful, valuable perspectives through these webinars. And we really hope we will continue working together and building this community further so that this region and all the other regions around the world can benefit from this kind of sharing that you have so kindly given us today. So with that, thank you so much once again, and allow me to pass the floor back to Ain. Thanks.
Thank you, Lavanya. And thank you, everyone. Oh, what a valuable discussion this has been. Thank you once again to our speakers, moderator, and also our participants listening in. Now, we're thrilled to move forward with the launch of the SEACAR Report 2.0. To do the honors, please welcome Ahila Ganesan, Senior Advisor at Think City.
Thanks, Ain. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad we got to today, and as a closing, we are finally launching the report, which took about 18 months to complete. It has been a very long 18 months. And as Lavanya said, we thank every author and contributor who made this happen, who was patient with us, who who took the time to deal with our back and forth throughout this journey. I would also like to take a couple of minutes here to thank some key people who were involved in the months of toil and back and forth with the various contributors to get to this point. First and foremost, I would like to thank Tay Kai Chuan, who was an intern that we employed in Think City to help us with this report. Without him, we probably would not have been able to get this report off the ground. I'd also like to thank Ain Zara, who together with Tay managed all the logistics, and that was half the battle to get this report done. I would also like to thank Tommy Chio, Timmy Kaparos, and Alia Kaz that got us to the finish line. Last, but definitely not the least, I am ever grateful to YB Nick Ahmad, former Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of Malaysia, who was supportive throughout the process and was kind enough to contribute the foreword to this report. We will be extending him a copy of this report, and every contributor here should know that he has gone through this report in detail, and he was very proud to be able to put the forward in this report. Finally, the SEACAR Alliance invites every stakeholder across sectors to collaborate in advancing climate adaptation and resilience in Southeast Asia. You can engage by sharing knowledge through publications and dialogues, leading topic discussions, or partnering as a resource contributor to projects and initiatives. Do reach out to us if you would like to be a part of this in any way. Active participation provides access to regional expertise, collaborative opportunities, and expanded networks. Join us in charting a climate resilient future for Southeast Asia. And with that, using the QR code, please download your copy of Strengthening Southeast Asia, Adaptation and Resilience through Collaboration and Innovation. Thank you. With that, I pass it back to Aik.
Thank you, Ahila. I'll just leave the screen open for everyone to scan the QR code for a bit. And as we come to the end of today's session, thank you once again for being part of this important discussion. So let's continue to work together to promote adaptation, resilience, and collaboration throughout Southeast Asia. So you can see on the screen, you can also scan this QR code on your screen to access the first SEACAR report and the newly published second report, as well as recordings of our past webinars with all the authors' presentations. And if you're interested in joining the SEACAR Alliance as a thought partner or in any other capacity, feel free to also share your interest through our expression of interest form. So with that, thank you everyone, and I wish everyone a pleasant evening. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, everyone.
And congratulations on launching this report.
Thank you.
Thank you and congrats.
Well done.
All your support,
Good.
your fabulous contributions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Are we staying back? No, no need. Is it?